Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Brewnomics interview series at the lounge at the end of the universe. I'm Jerry.
I'm Phalla.
And today our special guest
is Gig Ledbetter from Meriwether Cider. I'm the head cider maker and one of the owners. The rest of the owners are my family, all women. So I really don't have much to say. So when it comes to the business, they boss me around. Anyways.
Hey, sometimes that's good to have. We'll see if they watch this or not. Well, before we get too far into it, I'm excited to see where this goes. And yeah, it's a beer podcast, but we're not drinking beer today. We're drinking hard cider. You heard that right. What's up for us first?
Well, I brought in a strong arm semi-sweet. So this is a cider that is really what people think of traditionally as a hard cider. It's all apple, no additions of any kind. It's got a very appley flavor, about 6.9% ABV, 6.9% alcohol. Yeah, nice after flavor as well. Yeah, I like it.
Right off the bat, I would recommend if you have children to put this out of reach because it is delicious and it does not taste like there is any alcohol in this. It's crisp.
Exactly.
Start over.
Agreed.
That's when you get a clean, crisp taste. Apparently, it's crisp. Yeah. Refined. It's very smooth. I dig this a lot. I'm excited because we'll have ciders occasionally on the podcast, not too often, but Merryweather is a one we try to profile. I think it's even actually been the only cider we've ever had as part of like our Idaho profile.
Yep.
I tapped that segment. Spoiler alert, it got tapped. Yeah.
We did.
So
Hard.
this is your traditional, straight up old school hard apple cider.
Yeah. We do have another one. It's a semi-dry. It's Foothill semi-dry, and every Sunday when you get a pint, $1 is contributed to the trail system up in the foothills.
Excellent.
So, yeah, and so, but that's a bit drier. Something that you might find, some of the dry ciders out of England and things like that. It's also probably one of my favorites. But this is a traditional cider that you would think a cider ought to taste like. A lot of appley flavor.
Mm-hmm. It is, but it tastes so natural too.
Yeah.
There's nothing industrial about this. It definitely seems kind of like fresh and small batch.
Yeah, and it says semi-sweet, and you think, oh my God, it's going to be a sweet cider. It's really not. It's on the low end of the scale for sweetness of semi-sweet, and so I like it. I'll drink it every now and again.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But no, semi-sweet is appropriate. It's got a little bit of sweetness to it, but I definitely would not consider it overly sweet. What sort of apples do you use for this?
So we source most of our apples. They're all Northwest, and they come from Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And they go to a place. I actually toured a couple of the different apple juice producing plants, and it's called Fruit Smart out of Prosser, Washington. And it's got Fuji, Red Delicious, and Yellow Delicious, only to bring in the sugar.
Okay.
And then it also has a Jonathan, and there's one more, Granny Smith.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And the Granny Smith gives that acid tartness, that I like to work with to balance my cider.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, when I took my first drink, it seemed like I had just been into a Granny Smith.
Uh-huh.
And I really like that because that's my favorite apple.
Yeah.
Is it really?
I do too.
I didn't know that was anybody's favorite apple.
Yeah. I love tart.
Yeah?
So it's probably one of my favorites. as
Huh.
well.
I'm definitely a Red Delicious or like a with the
Honey Crisp
honey
or something
crisp
like
style.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Interesting. I also didn't realize how many different types of apples there were.
Oh.
I lived in this neighborhood for a little bit, and all the street names were after apples. And I started like doing research, and I was like, "Good God!
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
so many types of apples."
Yeah. And you get into cider apples, and that's a whole nother ball game. Cider apples, I mean, foxwhelp is, one of the names of an apple. Kingston Blacks. Yeah, so.
Is that from Jamaica?
Yeah. Well, the apple originated in Kazakhstan. And so
Oh.
all apples really eventually, came from Kazakhstan, somewhere down the way. Of all places, right? Yeah.
So neat
Who would've
history.
thunk it?
Yeah.
All right, so what'd you do before Merryweather?
Well, let's see. Graduated from college and swore I'd never go back to school. So I got in my Jeep, and the day after graduation, left for Alaska. The last frontier. Was going to work there the summer, and ended up staying for 13 years. And while I was there, I guided on Denali. I was a smoke jumper out of Fairbanks, Alaska, and did a little bit of building, house building, and anyways, I loved it. Yeah, I loved Alaska. And then eventually met my wife there, and we were on I don't know if I should go into this. Anyways, I finally decided that she was okay when she paddled for 24 hours straight on a river to get back. We were salmon fishing together in a canoe going down this river, and for 24 hours in the rain, and she never complained once. And I thought, oh yeah, that's the woman I want to marry. So anyways, okay, yeah. But so I eventually decided to leave Alaska and go back to graduate school. And while I was in Alaska, of course, I did a lot of rock climbing, did a lot of expedition climbing, went to Missoula, Montana for my graduate work. And then I did my doctorate at the University of Albuquerque, or University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And that, my research specialty was high altitude physiology, just because of climbing Denali and being up at altitude quite a bit. And anyways, got my degree, got a job at a university, Colorado Mesa University in Grand Junction, Colorado. And I've always been brewing beer since college. And I kept doing it. But then when I moved to Grand Junction, they had grapes and they had apples. And so, voila, I love chemistry, so I like to control that fermentation process, and started doing cider and wine. And I think my cider got good enough so that I could, had a lot of recipes, and when I finally retired from teaching, it was my wife again. It's like, you need something to do. And let's go to Boise where the kids are. My two daughters went to College of Idaho, Kate and Molly. And we decided to get them. They were also firefighters. One was a heli repeller, repelling out of helicopters into the fire. The other was a hot shot, initial attack fire on that front fire line. And we wanted to get them out of the fire with the change in fire behavior and climate, and they joined our business. So I get to work with my two daughters every day. It's just a great thing. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't expect to be so outmanned on this
I
one.
know, right? Yeah, those daughters sound tough, dude.
Right?
Don't mess with my daughter. I'll
Yeah.
tell you what. I remember I was sitting at a bar at, where the heck was it? Somewhere, anyways, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I see Kate coming in with a keg over her shoulder, big old keg, and the bartender looks up and he goes, "Oh my God, that's the woman I want to marry." Keg over her shoulder. But anyways, yeah. All right. Yeah.
All right, so where's the name Merryweather
Okay.
come from? Tell us a little bit about the name, the history, where we
All
can,
right. All right,
if
I
we want to
will
go
do
get
that.
a Merryweather cider.
Well, Merryweather, of course, everyone knows Meriwether Lewis and the Lewis and Clark expedition. And my wife is actually related to Meriwether Lewis.
Okay.
And so we decided, let's do it, and they came up through Idaho, and here we are, and there they were. And and if you ever want to go and see the amazing mural that my older daughter Kate drew at Bannock and Ninth. That's one of the places that we have a little pub. She drew that on the wall, shows the whole expedition route all the way up from St. Louis and to the coast. Yeah, but yeah, my wife's related to Meriwether Lewis, so. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I wonder if you were actually to ask how many Americans know the first names of Lewis and Clark. I bet not that many people would know.
Yeah, probably not.
Not anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Bob.
I guess that makes damn good sense as to why it would be Merryweather cider. Man, that is it. And also, genetically, I mean, if you're part of Lewis and Clark and they made it across the country in a wagon, you can't really complain about canoeing up a river in the rain,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
You're just
No.
genetically
No,
a
that's
badass.
Yeah, yeah. And our motto is to adventures big and small. So, and our whole family has really been into the wilderness and camping and hiking and doing those kinds of things and outdoor activities and good guardians of the earth. And so, it was perfect. We thought it was perfect. Yeah.
I like that.
Well, can you tell us a bit more about working with your family?
Oh man.
You know, just hanging out with the ladies. I heard they boss you around a lot.
They do.
All right.
Yeah, yeah, they boss me around, and you know what? I take it all, because most of the time they're right, unless it, I do the technical chemistry side of the cider. I've got a decent palate. Kate and Molly both have a really good palate. I won't talk about my wife's palate right now, but they're fantastic. And so, I'll make 3 or 4 varieties of a new flavor that we might be doing, and I'll get their feedback. Dad, a little too tart. You don't have that balance quite well. Maybe you need a little bit more of this or that. And so they are just fantastic with regard to that. We each have our job to do, and so we don't really step on each other's toes. And so there's never really much of an argument in any of us. It's just fantastic. I hate to say it sounds like it's so perfect, but I just love it. I'm just so glad that I can see them almost every day and work with them, and we have meetings every week. So it's a good deal.
It's the dream.
It's
a good dream,
man.
right?
It's
Yeah.
the dream. Yeah. I've got a good dream going.
Well, and that's
Right.
pretty awesome that you're able to identify each other's talents and, utilize those kind of separately without having the old too many chefs in the kitchen analogy, I guess is what it were.
exactly. Yeah.
So that's awesome. That that actually makes a lot of sense as to why you guys have been able to be so successful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've learned a fair amount about brewing, what it takes to brew a beer on this one, even kombucha, but never really cider. So since you've kind of done the gamut there, I don't know if you've ever done kombucha, but beer, wine, and cider, specifically interested in the beer, what are kind of the similarities between making a cider and the differences between making a cider versus a beer?
A beer? Well, we are actually under a wine permit. And when you say brew, that means you heat something up. We don't heat anything up, just like wineries. Wineries, they get their juice and they ferment it. And because you don't have the wort, you're not boiling anything and killing bacteria and so forth, you have to be really, really careful about sanitation. And we have to, just like wineries, have to be very, very careful about sanitation. So where obviously cider is apple juice that is fermented down. Apple juice has very little nutrients, where beer from the barley, or maybe you're doing wheat, has fantastic nutrients, and the yeast doesn't really need any additional nutrients. It's just happy as can be from converting those sugars in that wort into a beer. And also, beer has a lot of non-fermentable sugars, so that at the end of the ferment, it never gets down, very rarely gets down to 0, where it's used up all the sugar in that wort. But in cider, all the sugars that are in cider, will eat every single bit of that sugar that's in that cider. But you also have to add additional nutrients, trace elements. A lot of nitrogen is needed to keep the yeast happy. If you don't keep the yeast happy, it is going to have a little egg smell, rotten egg smell. It might be, if you can imagine a cowboy, riding the range all day in 95-degree temperatures, wearing leather chaps, and then coming home, and then you smell his crotch or something. Okay? That is what I call cowboy crotch smell.
Wish I could say I haven't been there.
You can but you can get those kind of manure, leathery, smells from a poor, nutrient-rich apple juice. So, yeah, isn't that funky? But
I'm not
yeah,
going to be able to get that image out.
yeah. I know. It's. I made that up, but
I love it.
that is what it. I swear, that's what it tastes like to me, because I have made some bad ones. A couple bad ones until I really learned my lesson.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but yeah.
So you have to have a wine license or permit
We have,
or whatever. Okay.
It's a wine license, and we don't. But because we have culinary apples, in other words, we have apples that you can just eat. We don't have true cider apples here yet in enough quantity that I can get a hold of them. Where they have a lot of tannins in them, like grapes have a lot of tannins, and so that's why they have to age that to mellow those tannins out. Well, with culinary apples, they're just sweet and delicious, and aging's not going to do a darn thing to them. So we can ferment our cider, make it, and drink it the next day, and it's going to taste the same as if we aged it for a year.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there's no real improvement in the flavor of the cider. But so that's the difference between the wine and the cider. And the beer, we don't boil anything. There's no boiling. I'll talk about when we get to it, I'll talk about my hop cider and how we bring out that aroma and the flavor of the hops in a cider. The next one that we're going to be drinking is a base cider. And the base cider is just the apple juice fermented down, and then we back sweeten or back flavor with certain things. But yeah, I don't know if you want to get into that one now. Is that on your agenda? Or?
Might as well. I think
You-
is
you
this
boo.
the gin and juice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
Okay, so this is the gin and juice. So I got this from my friend that was in our brew club in Grand Junction, Colorado, and he runs a distillery. And so I got his recipe for how he instills flavor into his gin at the distillery. And I took that recipe and I modified it quite a bit because he had a lot more juniper in than I wanted in my cider. So, and I just, like in beer where they dry hop, they take the hops and put it in a mesh bag or whatever and let it just sit for, and you get the flavor and the aroma out of that. Well, I do that with this. I just put it in the cider in bags. I'm not going to give you my entire recipe, but there is juniper, angelica root, orris root, a little cinnamon, licorice root. Yeah. So, and you can taste that in there. But it's, it's a real different, and the base is all cider. It's all fermented apple juice. Very, very little of anything else. It's got an amazing aroma, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
It smells like smells like walking into your grandma's house at Christmas. She's making that apple pie, a little cinnamon in there, just warms up the whole house. Beautiful, welcoming smell.
Yeah.
That's what I get out of this.
Yeah, very dry drink. It could almost be a cocktail. Maybe, throw a little vodka in there or something. I don't know.
There you go. Spice it up a little bit. No, I like that. Is this one also coming in at 6.9%.
That's also a 6.9. Yep. Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. We will be right back.